I started to recognize that if I went any farther down the rabbit hole, that I wouldn't be able to come back out. Like this obsession with disclosure and like, this focus on the government and disclosure could be and probably is a big red herring. Like if the attention is being drawn that way, I tend to, okay, check that. But also, what about abductees? What about experiencers? The honest answer is I have no idea what's going on. I don't know.
Come on, Fawn.
I know.
Hey guys, welcome back to Coffee and UFOs. I have a great guest on tonight, Fawn Miller, and she is here to talk about, we're going to talk about the gamut of UFOs, spirituality, and wherever the conversation takes us. Very briefly, Fawn Miller is a master coach, facilitator, educator, researcher, community cultivator, and exuberant creative partner with a decade of experience in helping ambitious, accomplished, high-spirited humans to elevate their evolution while supporting personal, professional, and spiritual transformation. She also digs UFOs. Fawn, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming on Coffee and UFOs.
Yeah.
So before we talk about UFOs in particular, tell us a little bit about your background, how you ended up even considering, because I know you're launching a podcast at some point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of notorious Pandora's box of questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that tell me your background.
Or we can just bypass that if you want.
No, I love it. I love it. It's always interesting to me to notice like what drops in when that question is asked, especially in this kind of a space. So no, I appreciate that question. I think it's really important. I've always been passionate about the human experience. I'm pretty sure I came out of the womb fascinated with life and pretty obsessed with this world, this experience of being a human being in the world.
Yeah.
And for good or for bad, I was one of the kids with an insatiable curiosity. And that insatiable curiosity throughout the years and throughout the decades led me to ask some big questions, and some big questions really young. So I was the kid at like 7 years old or 8 years old, like reading the encyclopedia for fun, or going to the library to check out books about philosophy and psychology when I was in 8th grade. And
some people were stacking the encyclopedias to get cookies, not reading
exactly.
it. Right?
Not to say that I wasn't doing that too.
Okay.
I mean, I was a kid, but so yeah, I for whatever reason I've been super curious my entire life, and that curiosity led me to find out that a lot of what I was taught in school was in fact a partial truth, or entirely inaccurate, or information espoused as being fact that in fact was hypothetical at best.
Sure.
And so when I started to catch wise to that, I started to kind of doubt the entire infrastructure around me, politically, religiously, academically, etc. In the sense of, well, if this isn't entirely true or accurate, then what is? And does that mean that this other thing isn't entirely true or accurate? So it kind of became this, the curiosity led to even greater curiosities around what do we actually know and how do we actually know what we know? Mm-hmm. So, lighthearted questions as a teenager that I was orbiting. And one of the things that was really like a burning curiosity for me was around nature and human beings. And I noticed that nature seemed to do a really great job at thriving. Like I grew up in the mountains, I grew up in the woods, playing in the marshes, frolicking in the trees, and noticed that nature seems to have it kind of figured out. And then looking at the human world around me, it seemed that a lot of people struggled, and some people seemed to do just fine. So those kinds of wonderings and curiosities led me to psychology and studying psychology, and specifically the psychology of purpose and consciousness at UC Berkeley in my undergrad, getting to kind of cut my teeth on some of the research that was happening around what we do actually know about human nature, and kind of dismantling some of the assumptions that I had grown up with in terms of the standard psychological model of human beings are kind of flawed and we need some fixing or a lot of fixing.
What would be
And
what is that?
yeah,
What are we misunderstanding?
yeah, well, I think partially innocently, partially perhaps manufactured throughout the 20th century, especially. Psychology was really driven by a focus on what's wrong with people, to put it just kind of bluntly, right? In
True.
terms of
Yeah.
disorder or dysfunction or abnormality, or and so the Freudian model, that
Yeah.
then became some of the more behaviorist models, which were extremely, I mean, not fantastic for humans and for science.
Yeah.
It kind of snowballed into this like clinical approach to treating human beings, and treating human beings as their diagnoses, or treating human beings as their behaviors, instead of a more holistic view of the human being. And there really wasn't a study of what's right with people until the late 90s, when the head of psychology at UPenn, Martin Seligman, started to wonder, why aren't we studying, this is like obviously Cliff's Notes, but why aren't we studying what's right with people? This is a little odd.
Mhm.
Historically, there was a vein of psychology called the humanist psychology, which was actually like Maslow and a couple of other really important thinkers, but they were kind of quashed by this larger diagnostic orientation and model. So Seligman, after having done 20 years of analyzing people, realized, I wonder what would happen if we start to get curious about what's right with people and study people who are really healthily adapted to the world.
Right.
And come to find out, 2 or 3 decades, I mean, this is really recent research, really in the course of human history, but come to find out, we are actually oriented and wired to thrive, and we're oriented and wired to be very resilient,
Yeah.
and to be altruistic, and to be communal, and to be vibrating, if you will. It's kind of a woo term, but to be vibrating at a frequency that would be conducive to us enjoying life. Like,
Right.
that's our natural default. And that's just not what was really discussed or taught, or maybe even known about for
Yeah.
a very, very long time. At least not like in the mainstream.
That's our okay, so if that's our natural default, is it
Mhm.
because you do have individuals that are, psychopaths, right? So there is a miswiring in the brain. I almost wonder, like, if that's like that corrupts the system, and then humans react to these, like kind of agent Smiths, in a sense,
Mhm.
and then that caused this chain reaction of like toxic behavior, and then it just gets passed down, passed down, passed down. Because I don't know enough, but in some of my readings of Native American history and such, there seemed to be, and this could just be perception, like much more, equilibrium and um, balance, and like a holistic society, without these kind of strange aberrations that we have now. I mean,
Yeah.
look, like with the shooters that we have these days. I mean, it's unbelievable. How did we get to this point? Where there's just so much. I know we're not talking UFOs right now, but like that'll actually connect into this. But
Mhm.
if that's who we are by default, we're supposed to be good natured. What happened?
Mm-hmm. It's a really that's the question that I came into this world with, and that I've been on a kind of insatiable, relentless pursuit to understand better. Are you familiar with the work of Ian McGilchrist? Doctor, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to share some life-changing stuff with you.
Gilchrist?
Ian McGilchrist.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a neuroscientist, or psychiatrist, I should say, neuroscientist.
Okay.
And he was an Oxford scholar philosopher, but he came out with this book called The Master and His Emissary in 2008, and it's a massive tome. And what, in a nutshell, and I'm happy to share some links to some information for your audience if they're interested.
Sure, yeah.
His work has revolutionized my entire world and helped me not only better understand these deeper questions, but also so much of the UFO and experiencer phenomenon too, interestingly.
Oh.
So what he discovered, to put it very hopefully succinctly, is that everything we thought we knew about the hemispheres, the brain hemispheres, is actually not, for the most part, not accurate. And in fact, what is accurate is that it's not what the hemispheres do. Both hemispheres pretty much kind of play a part in doing everything, but it's how the hemispheres engage with the world and create reality. And the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere create very different experiences of the world. And throughout his research over the course of 40 years, with patients who had, lesions in either side of the brain, or I know Diane Hennessy Powell actually talks about this a fair amount, and some other people kind of in the sphere of the phenomenon. But looking at these patients that had damage on one or the other side, and then kind of watching how they orient with the world and the kind of world that is created given that damage. And then in addition to doing different kinds of studies on patients or just people, and noticing that those who are more right hemisphere dominant, let's say, and I like to use the word harmony because the right hemisphere wouldn't use the language of dominant, but
right. Yeah.
Harmony. When the right hemisphere is in charge, which is actually the way we are designed to be in our neurochemistry. Okay. The right hemisphere takes in the world as a full picture. It has the capacity to understand implicitness. It has a capacity for empathy. Mm-hmm. It has an understanding of togetherness, of reciprocity, of relationship, of movement, of flow, of nuance, and so many other things. Whereas the left hemisphere, the reality that it creates is one that is very, for lack of a better term, very mechanical and mechanistic. So the left hemisphere, when it's dominant, experiences a world that is very static, very objective. It's very righteous. It thinks that it's right about the assessments that it makes. Although it makes very partial assessments because it can't understand the data from the right hemisphere. It's very, go ahead.
No, I thought that was interesting, but yeah.
It's super interesting. Yeah. So the information comes in through the right hemisphere, gives it to the left hemisphere, essentially, to kind of organize it. And then it's meant to be passed back to complete the picture. But the left hemisphere, if it's too dominant, for myriad reasons that could occur, either biochemically or culturally, the left hemisphere, when it's in charge, that's when we start to see behaviors that are more indicative of a really mechanistic, mechanical, emotionless, lacking empathy, power hungry, partially perspectived. So he writes this book called The Master and His Emissary, and it's this chronicle of the past 2,000 years of human history and the cycles of civilization. And what he notices in the patterns of these civilizations that flourish, right? These indigenous cultures, go back to your question, indigenous cultures and other cultures that were balanced, that seemed to have a a more harmonious way of
Mhm.
living and like a healthier psychological disposition, as we would call it
Right,
today.
right.
And then these other cultures that were warmongering or that had a really staunch hierarchy or and we see it. So he kind of maps this out over history, and his hypothesis, supported by all of this, is that the left hemisphere it's kind of brute, very, very brute. And so when it gets into a position where it's dominant, it doesn't understand that that is what will be its downfall. It can't see the bigger picture. And so these civilizations rise due to this, what he calls immoderacy of greatness,
Yeah.
this nobody can topple me, kind of what we see in the world so much today, which then creates a culture that shapes and conditions its people to be left hemisphere dominant.
Right.
And that left hemisphere dominance is where we see psychosis or violence or trauma,
Right.
yeah. So,
Grandiosity. Like,
yes,
right.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So we're
Yeah.
speaking the same language.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, so there were you know, certain Native American groups that were, kind of more, more war like, right, in their behaviors. But like, I think a good clue to a healthy society is, because my wife and I had done a documentary years ago on this,
Mm.
but in like in some Native American cultures, they have what is called the two spirit person.
Mhm.
And this is someone who is and again, these are societies that have, male and female archetypes that they grow up in with, they have the grandma and grandfather, um, but on occasion, someone is born who's different, and they're okay with that. They were okay with that. And in fact, there are certain, rituals that were given out. And this might sound too crazy, but like one of the Plains tribes, there was a ritual where and this is what they did with all children. They would put them in a ring, and in the middle of the ring there would be bow and arrow, or uh, the weaving baskets, and all these different things that were typically male or female roles. And then they would light the circle on fire, and the child would have to grab something and then run out of the circle. So the idea was like the first thing that they're drawn to grab and run out,
Wow.
resonated with them. And sometimes a child might, a woman might grab a bow, or a male might grab a woven basket or whatever it is.
Mm.
And they embrace the idea that sometimes people are just born a little bit different, and it's like, okay, so you're born different. Let's incorporate you to our societal structure, and then we'll move on with our lives, and that's okay. And a lot of shamans were often like were transgender as well.
Yeah.
And I think that today I see this strange animosity against transgenderism that I find profoundly disturbing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of went on a little diatribe,
No, keep
Jen,
going.
but
Keep going.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's just what I see. I see that we
Mhm.
are. Remember that documentary, Koya Koitsaki?
Yes.
I
Oh
can't remember the
gosh.
actual name now.
Philip Glass, right?
Philip Glass did the music
Did
for it. Yeah.
the music. Yeah.
Um, but it was the life out of balance. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Now, how does that tie into UFOs? That's what I'm
Ha!
curious about.
That's what I'm curious about too.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there's I'll propose this and then get your thought on it.
Cool.
So I think that, because I do see people who I would consider bigoted, interested in the topic of UFOs, right?
Mm.
Um, but I still think that all of us on a subconscious level, we're reaching for something. And I think that and I believe UFOs are like actual physical, things that are coming here, intelligently controlled. But I still think the UFO is a symbol. it's an archetype that people are striving for something. There's some kind of meaning, something's missing, and that's
Mm.
part of why people are drawn to it, even if someone is not, a good person per se.
Mhm. Mhm. Can I ask you more about
Mhm.
where that sense comes from for you?
Well, I think it just comes from my own place, right? I attended a UFO sighting myself, and then that like clicked, clicked. That was it. Like after that, um, I was eternally, because it represents the sky, and historically in mythology, I think the sky beings were like gods, and they were there to answer the big questions. So I think that on a subconscious level, um, I think that, and this is very Jungian, but I think that that's what's going
Mhm.
on in that intense curiosity. And I also think that it's a savior
Mm.
complex too. I think that we all, to some degree, kind of hope that maybe, if they came down, that it would kind of like Ronald Reagan said, kind of like force us all to get along. Um, but again, like I said, like I see people who have a certain, like a certain cruelty in them towards other humans, not all humans, but just some other
Mhm.
humans, and who are interested
Mhm.
in this big topic, a topic that is innately a topic of the grand diversity of nature and reality and what's capable. So
Mhm.
it seems like a contradiction, and I guess it is, but I see these things living in the same space.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing more about that. Yeah. It's it is interesting to track along with the various interpretive lenses there
Mhm.
are about the UAP topic. Um, and also for I'm guessing your audience is well aware of this, but the farther down the rabbit hole you go, the bigger the rabbit hole gets. And the
Yeah.
more the more we find or at least I can speak for
Mhm.
myself and a lot of other enthusiasts that you think you think all of a sudden you're interested in UFOs, whether you've had a direct contact or like myself, just kind of spontaneously like and then a few weeks later, a few months later, you're studying like Gnosticism and the esoteric origins of religious history, et cetera, and the
Mhm.
archons and the demiurge. And so the UFO topic has this tendency
Sure.
to just
Yeah.
like almost like micro or macro dose us into these
Yeah.
other realms that have been occulted, hidden for so long. And so the noticing around the ways in which people interpret the phenomena, I think, could be indicative of so many different things. It could be indicative of what you're speaking to in terms of maybe an archetypical predisposition that we have, or an archetypical conversation that we're having with the Platonic space, or and I think though too that there is likely a lot of different manifestations of the phenomenon. There's a lot of different things or non-things,
Mhm.
energies, possibilities in the possibility space of UAP that those with, let's say, more malicious or left hemisphere driven dispositions, of course, would be drawn to, because whatever they're seeing, I would imagine, whatever they are identifying with in that, or maybe perhaps what they're literally encountering, if it is a superior technology, or if it is, maybe like a darker energetic realm or entity, that could very well be happening too.
Mhm.
There could very well, and I mean, I hear myself talking about this right now, and I'm like, I am definitely down the rabbit hole.
Okay, yeah,
But it's
yes, but
yeah,
I will
yeah.
say, because goes back to what you were saying earlier.
Mm,
When you first got interested in this thing, you started
mhm.
questioning what you were told, what the
Yeah.
narrative wasn't exactly what it was. And the problem with that is that once you have that realization, it's like pulling the trap door, and either you can go down slowly, hold on to the rope and go down slowly, or you just fall.
You
And
can try to go down slowly.
yeah, but there's, and I think that's where QAnon, really thrived,
Mm,
because people don't trust the government, people don't trust narratives,
yeah.
people don't trust anything, and they start just, and since you were lied to, you just start filling in the gaps on your own. You just start believing whatever makes more sense to you, because it doesn't matter what they say anyway, because it's not real. So I might as well just, go in here. Um, and I think that's why we get people who are like obsessed with like the blue avians and the secret space program. Um, David Wilcox and all that. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
it, and
Yeah.
and but again, like I think all these people are striving for something um bigger. They're seeking something bigger than themselves in one way or
Mm.
another.
Mm. It could be. I mean, it could be. I mean, certainly, I would agree with that.
Hmm.
The degree to which that is the case universally, I don't know. And there's that quote, when you shout into the abyss shouts back. There's also this question
Hmm.
of like, are people seeking that, or are they being compelled to seek something greater than themselves? There's kind of common, I think, in the conversation right now is the consciousness element of all of this, and
Hmm.
that Jacques Vallée, for example, and others have, to some degree, spoken to the possibility that it's in some way like nudging our awakening, or nudging our evolution. Now,
Hmm.
in what direction and to what degree, who knows?
Yeah.
um, but I think that there's, to circle back to what you were saying about the very slippery slope that this can create.
Hmm.
I wholeheartedly agree, and in fact, full transparency, I had to shut the door on this in 2007, 2008. So after about six years or so of, so 2003 was when I woke up one morning, literally out of nowhere, obsessed, like having never really thought about it really before, or had, it was like, oh, UFOs are in sci-fi shows and stuff. But woke up obsessed and went on this go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, no, go. Yeah.
Just went on this crusade of curiosity
Mhm.
to find anything I could that could be, I was just like, oh yeah, UFOs. People say that those are real and a thing. I really started from the like bewilderment of like, oh yeah, this is a topic. And this was pretty much not pre-internet, but it was
Mhm.
pre-YouTube. It was there wasn't a lot of
Sure.
resourcing happening on the internet except for some really obscure forums. And so I would go to, bike my way to Blockbuster and get the documentaries and, the KGB and UFOs and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And did my darndest to really dig through everything I could find to learn more about this phenomenon. And it just, again, it really, it really unveiled so many tendrils of human history and political. I mean, I was also reading Howard Zinn and kind of privy to like political stuff at the time too. But I got to a point, Alan, where it was like I started to recognize that if I went any farther down the rabbit hole, that I wouldn't be able to come back
Right.
out and operate in functional, like functionally in the world, like in the system, in society. I just knew that, in combination with realizing that it just wasn't doing me any darn good at that
Yeah.
juncture of my life to really be, exploring that stuff.
Mhm.
So I know that experience on a very personal level of like, I need to like shut this door,
Sure.
like turn all the
Yeah.
locks, get the vault, shut the vault, and walk away for what I thought I didn't, in an indeterminate amount of time. Um,
A lot of people, even if they're not consciously thinking that, like, oh my God, I need to, some people just do. They don't know why. They're
yeah,
just like, I need a break from this for a little while. And they step
yeah.
away, and then eventually they come back. But
Mhm.
hopefully, I'm assuming you came back with a little bit different perspective.
Mm, certainly, yeah. Thankfully, during the decade or so that I was for several years I was kind of out of the, I stopped researching it in the way that I had been. I started focusing more on like my, starting a business and working on a professional career, helping people in the realms of purpose and consciousness. And um, I still listen to Coast to Coast. I would still listen to my Art Bell or my George Norrie or my George Knapp. And, like that was fun, but that was kind of the extent to which I was like in it.
Yeah.
And throughout that time, I am really grateful. I was able to find teachers and study in some directions that were helping me to understand ontological footing and helping me to understand how to swim in the unknown without needing to or feeling compelled to grab onto whatever passing lifeboat thematically, topically, like, that was passing by, whether that be psychedelics or whether that be, any particular direction. And so there's something really valuable that I thus far discovered about being able to be in the kind of like it feels almost like a flotation tank of like, I don't have a clue what's going on. I don't know if anybody knows what's going on, especially in the UAP realm. But that doesn't mean we can't have knowledge. That doesn't mean we don't have an experiential phenomenological experience of life, right? Of what it is to be a human being. So there's this interesting paradox that I have, I guess, that's found me or that I have found. And then I've studied very devotedly the work of John Vervaeke, who's a seminal philosopher who does a lot of incredible work around meaning and essentially like being able to maintain a sense of reality and experience, but without being committed necessarily in a particular direction.
Sure. Yeah.
So now I'm able to explore this from this really, it feels just like a really expansive place of tangible curiosity and discovery. And the rabbit holes still go down. I mean, so I kind of resurfaced into this world. Sometimes I feel like I just kind of checked out for a while. And then in 2021 or 2022, I mean, when I was into this stuff, there were no YouTube channels about it. There were nobody was talking about it. I was like by myself. And then 21 or 22, I was on the UFO subreddit and people were, and I was like, wait, there's subreddit, there's a whole thing. So post 2017, there had been this explosion and I was kind of like late to the party all of a sudden. Yeah. Like, wait a second, this is like, we can talk about this now. We can, have conversations. And so popping back up on this side of it, having thankfully had that kind of interim sandwich time to get a sense of I don't know, some really important things, I think, in that middle ground, and then recognizing that, oh my gosh, this is like, there's this tidal wave that's been happening, ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has been a tidal wave and it hasn't stopped. Like,
right.
It ebbs and flows, but it's not going away. That's for sure. I think that this idea that disclosure is coming sometime soon and through the government, I think it's questionable. What do you think? Do you think that there's something really there?
Okay, those are kind of three questions.
Is it inevitable disclosure, particularly by the government?
I follow all the things so closely now, and this word disclosure, like, what do people even think that means? like when people say, oh, the disclosure from the government, are they like, oh, the government's like going to come out and president or whomever is going to say, okay, the aliens
Yeah.
are here they are, here's the beings, we've been involved since 1940 7 in Roswell and before. If that's disclosure, I mean, maybe, and probably the events at play that would lead to that would be some kind of a forcing function for it to occur,
Mm.
because there has been um, so much foul play and so much secrecy and God knows what involved with the whole situation, as far as most arrows point to, or paths point to. Um, so maybe if forced to, the government would. But the thing is, even if they would we trust? Does anybody believe it? Would that?
Right. Well, I think that you can't just say aliens are here and Roswell was real, and then
Yeah.
peace out. Like it's,
Right.
you have to present something. You say, yes, we actually
Mhm.
have a craft, and we'll invite some scientists from X universities, and you know,
Mhm.
we'll have an international, symposium of some sort to bring people from all around the world, so we can share some of this information, discuss it with the scientists,
Mhm.
present what we know and what we have. That's the way you would do it. Um, and then there's no denying it. And then, you can have independent labs and things testing this material or that material.
Right.
Or, perhaps they have, photographs. Of course, there's all kinds of people who are going to say, "Oh, it's Project Bluebeam."
Mhm.
It's all it's all fake. It's a hologram. It's like, no matter what you say, like, they're not going to believe it anyway. So there's
Yeah.
always going to be that small percentage of people, that's for sure. But I think that
Yeah.
you present the evidence, you get other non-governmental officials involved, and
Mhm.
that's it. Yeah, I
Mhm.
would like to think that we're going to do that. I'm just not
Mhm.
sure that's really going to happen anymore. I do believe that there are people trying to make that happen, and I think that's what you're saying is
Yeah.
like a forced. They're going to force the hand of the government, someone or the thing, the extraterrestrials and non-human intelligences will do something. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe it'll be 3 Eye Atlas, maybe, who knows?
She's looking weirder every
Every
day.
day. Like, what's that you got going on? Like, yeah.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Anomalies abound.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's interesting because Carl Nell, I don't know if you heard, but Carl Nell just recently essentially like put the kibosh on the disclosure, saying that disclosure it's not going to happen. Like we've kind of,
Yeah.
passed the bell curve. Now, Carl Nell, I've taken classes with him. He's a phenomenal human being,
Mm,
and I've learned a lot. But um, it's there's such a top there's such a top-down narrative around that I think it's a red herring. I on the One thing that I feel very passionate about is the whistleblowers, the individuals who are coming forth to the best of my knowledge and sense,
mhm.
are you know absolutely sharing what they experienced, and what they
Oh,
believe
yeah,
they
for sure.
experienced. And so that I feel very passionate about. And to me, that is, if we're looking for disclosure, the human beings that have been going through this and who have actually suffered and experienced these things
Yeah.
are far more important to me personally than any governmental body saying this, that, or the other. Because
Mm,
there's just, again, like the believability and the burden of proof in terms of like a largely governmental organization is like a little bit iffy. But there have been in addition to experiencers that are not of military, rank or origin or affiliation,
mhm.
but really the whistleblowers and the people who have been so brave to like stand in front of our Congress and stand in
Yeah.
front of, or go into skiffs and talk about these things, that that I feel, extremely passionate about. And I also feel like this obsession with disclosure and like, this focus on the government and disclosure could be, and probably is, a big red herring
Mm,
as to the fact that they're already here, it's already been going on, this, like, we don't need disclosure from the government. And whatever else that we're being the attention is being drawn away from toward disclosure in terms of the world of the phenomenon. That's where, like, if the attention is being drawn that way, I tend to, yeah, okay, check that. But also, what about abductees? What about experiencers?
Sure.
What about, right, like, what about encounters with, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that we might be siphoning our personal resources toward disclosure that could be, if devoted in other directions related to this. And people are, by all means, there's some amazing research and work going on, but anyway, I don't want to say disclosure is overrated, because I, as much as anybody, would like to, I guess, see that.
Well,
But
this kind of goes back to what you're saying is not grabbing onto every conspiracy theory around down the rabbit hole. Like, you can't just, like, people, I think, once they're free of the narrative by, the power structures that have existed, they need something else to hold on to. Like, so they do grab something along the way. And excuse me, at the end of the podcast, I always end with live in the mystery, because for me, it's like having to embrace and just, like, accept that you don't know is, I think it's a scary place for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But if you do it, it's actually quite freeing. It feels good. And you can kind of enjoy that. You can enjoy the process. You can enjoy the mystery. What makes the X-Files so great? Well, they never they never really solve it, right? It's like, and they keep changing whatever the answer might be. And there's kind of a joy in that. And I think that it's just like science. They're not going to solve everything in the next, 400 years. I'm sure there's going to be more to discover. But you learn a little bit of this, you discover a little bit of that along the way, and it's exciting and it's satisfying. But you also have to accept that you're just not going to have all the answers at the same time. And I think that in the world of ufology, there are people that get burnt out because they get so they get into this, they get excited, they get passionate, they're all in, and then after so many years, they just either flip and become debunker with a big D, because they just can't accept that how come we don't know already, then it must not be true, or they just get bitter and angry, and it's a shame, because
have you run into a lot of that?
Oh yeah.
Really? Yeah.
Which is why I don't spend a lot of time on X.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not. There's a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
On X, aka Twitter. So yeah, and I think the difference is between, like, people who are more inclined, and this is just generalization, more inclined to be interested in the mysteries, ontological mysteries, and spiritual mysteries. They're less, I think, inclined to get angry, because there's something innate about, like, the mystery school, and whereas in the UFO side, they're still striving for something that is transcendent, but the path, or the orientation towards that thing isn't supported with anything else other than the end point. There's no, like, psychologically speaking, there's nothing in between to nurture that path. It's kind of like somebody who wants to be, get rich quick, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And there's satisfaction in the challenge. There's satisfaction in the journey there. Does that make sense to you?
Totally.
Okay.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah. And going back to your question around what did the brain hemispheres have to do with UFOs?
Yeah.
What you just described is such a beautiful description of how the left hemisphere would interface with this and orient toward it. The dominant, left hemisphere. wanting certainty and control, and to be able to therefore be able to manipulate it or to compartmentalize it and feel superior and feel, which is what so much of modern day scientism is. And whereas the right hemisphere has this capacity for wonder and awe, and again, the holistic, bigger picture, for not needing to focus on one particular objective item, but to be able to see it in the context of the ecology or the scene that it's in, and the environment that it's in. And so with kind of loosely tying this together, and I think there are many threads to be woven actually between insofar as the implications of this realization around the roles of the hemispheres and the phenomenon. The way that we engage with this, the way that we explore it, the way that we approach it is vastly different if we're coming anything really, not just the phenomenon, but like making a meal or talking to a friend is going to be very different if
different.
we're right hemisphere dominant or left hemisphere dominant. But with the phenomenon in particular, it's the left hemisphere that becomes very very kind of turns in on whatever it's not understanding and starts to make draw false conclusions. Does it all the time. False conclusions or case closed, moving on, these kinds of like very finite and almost like aggressions toward whatever it's orienting with. So yeah, the mystery, those who stay in the mystery, I would agree. And it does seem that, at least for the folks that I follow and study, like Diana, Walsh Pasulka, that I've studied with a lot and taken a lot of her classes, and Jeffrey Kripal, and some of the movers and shakers and thinkers that are exploring this in a really open way, tend to be really reluctant to land on this is what it is, or this is what we're dealing with, or, the like, oh, well, we haven't figured it. I mean, Jacques Vallée, for goodness sakes, I mean, he's been doing this for 70 years, I don't know, 60 years. And he's like, oh no, still no idea, probably a trickster. But
right. But he was kind of ahead of the curve about the consciousness thing.
In the Western world, for sure. Yeah.
There is I was just talking to Dean Radin, just did a recording with him last night. And, we kind of just touched on a little bit, like the resurgence of the popularization of panpsychism or idealism. Yeah. And I've always loved that as a potential solution to reconcile what I think is something that's unreconcilable. Is that a word?
Irreconcilable. Yeah.
God, a thinking creator, creating a reality with inherent suffering and just horrific, the horrific human behavior that we see manifest. For me, it's unreconcilable. Whereas if panpsychism comes into the picture, then you had a consciousness that's actually kind of unfolding, right? Is that like Vishnu, is Vishnu's dreaming, right? That sort of thing. And then the suffering that's going along the way, it's not intentional. It's not planned. It just is happening. And then I think, okay, so how do we reconcile that with the fact that like all these religions and whatnot say, okay, it's all about love, this higher thing of love. And I've, in my own psychedelic experiences and other people in their experiences, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, sages, mystics, saints, like all have this projection, Buddhism, like of this oneness of love, right? Like, or source, or whatever that is. And I kind of feel like that's like the love is like the telos
Mm-hmm.
that, but my guess, and this is pure speculation, obviously,
Mm.
but that somewhere along the growth and evolution of this consciousness force that we have yet undetected, um, it evolved to the point where its end goal, its telos, became love, like the end of time. That's what we're moving
Mm.
towards. It didn't start that
Mm.
way. It just evolved that way. And in that way, I can kind of make sense of like these mystical experiences and the horrible things and
Mm.
suffering that exist in the world.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I really appreciate that description of your experience and working through those questions and grappling with those like irreconcilable, unreconcilable, um, yeah, uh, issues of
Well,
existence.
I was raised Catholic, so
Okay.
it's one way or the
Yeah.
other, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I love too that you just spoke with Dean Radin.
Mhm.
He's just wow. We're so lucky to have him.
Oh yeah, the work that
I've
Ions is doing is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And finally getting to have a seat at the table of conversation that
Sure.
it was
Yeah.
not, really welcome at for a long time scientifically. Yeah, I've studied with Bernardo Kastrup for the past 4.5 years, and
Mm.
he's kind of our modern day proponent of analytic idealism,
Mhm.
metaphysical idealism, analytic idealism. And when I came across his descriptions and articulations of
Yeah.
the ontic nature of the universe, reality, and everything in it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Douglas Adams did a fine job, but Bernardo
He
Kastrup,
he did. He did.
Bernardo Kastrup does it was so so helpful and because go ahead,
Well, no, what was helpful?
So I've had a very strong sense, having studied this stuff for so long, that materialism, physicalism, scientism, as we know it in the Western world, is insufficient.
Yeah.
It's insufficient, and it's really turned into, I think, just incredibly harmful for the progression of humanity. And so, in knowing that, and then having studied other. Other metaphysics, other, religious, spiritual, just really being curious about everything.
Mhm.
And psychedelics, the sense of what is that I had kind of arrived at, not in necessarily tangible ways, but like in the more grokky kind of ways of like, who am I? What is the universe? What is reality? How does this all work? The sense of that I had when I heard Bernardo talk about to kind of lay forth analytic idealism, it clicked immediately that was that not only did that describe it very articulately, but also made a hell of a lot more sense than physicalism. And
Sure.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because what I've realized in like now surfing back into the UAP phenomenon
Mhm.
world and having studied with Bernardo and all these other things is that, like this term that John Mack used around ontological shock.
Mhm.
Yes, ontological shock is an experience that people have. That's a label or a term that's given to a certain kind of experience that people have.
Yeah.
And my sense is that, and I think Jeffrey Kripal, I think, talks about this too, that the shock only comes from the fact that we have been steeped and conditioned in an ontology that is absolutely inaccurate. Materialism, some aspects of religiosities or religions, And so the shock can come from, this isn't supposed to be happening, this isn't possible,
Mhm.
this experience can't be real, or there's no place in our worldview, there's no, especially in Western culture, there's no shamanic guidance around these kinds of things, there's just no, except for maybe sci-fi, like good sci-fi. But
Mhm.
so analytic idealism has, I've just come to see on this really exciting kind of macro level that, oh, like a lot of the I guess dissonance within individual and collectively within the UAP world is because it's planted in materialism. Like, how can aliens travel from,
True.
like Alpha Centauri to planet Earth? That's impossible. Well, yeah, in materialism, if you're
Right.
staunchly physicalist materialist. But however, in even in the realms of quantum physics, but in analytic idealism, or even like non-dual monism or dual aspect monism, there's room for, this is totally all happening.
Yeah.
This is totally all right here, right now. This is all manifestations of mind at large,
Mhm.
which maybe is kind of what you were talking about or pointing to with panpsychism. So there's like no issue. Like it's our perceptual world is limited and created by our perceptions, and there's a whole teeming everything happening around us
Yeah.
all the time. And so I think the ontological footing of materialism, physicalism breaking apart and shaking apart right now is, and thankfully, analytic idealism being kind of brought to the table by Bernardo and David Hoffman from a mathematical perspective, is really giving us something that makes way more sense and can allow for these experiences to be real or to be possible,
Right.
and can be really validating in knowing that. So my podcast is going to be called Ontological Grok: The Nature of Reality and the Reality of Nature.
All right. All right.
Um, Exploring these kinds of
Mhm.
things from like different perspectives, and what would have to be true, or what would be true, such that people are having abduction experiences, or such that like the telepathy tapes are real. And
Well, I'm just waiting for the
yeah.
video. I want to see the video. I love the telepathy tapes, and I know they're making a
Oh, the
documentary.
documentary.
Like,
Yeah.
because it's not that I think anyone's lying, but again,
Mm,
it's like that's still that part, like the part of me that's still skeptical, right?
mm,
I know what you're saying. I believe that it's possible, but
yeah.
I need to see you with the board in front. I need
Uh-huh.
to see that, because and that gets back to like the idea of what's disclosure, what's proof. Hey, we got a guest, a
This
second
is
guest.
Delphi.
So cute. I love it. Um, to anyone listening, that's her cat, adorable cat.
Yeah. So
We're
funny
cat
though.
friendly podcast here.
We are cat friendly. Are you familiar with Ingo Swann?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I named my cats Ingo and Delphi because
The Delphi. Wow, I love that. Yeah.
before they could see, their little eyes were closed, but they could see, still maneuver. And I was like,
Mm,
you two,
right.
you are
Right. They had 6 sense whiskers.
exactly. Yeah.
But to your point, so what Neil deGrasse Tyson would say, or other scientists would say to a lot of
Mm,
that is that, but
mhm,
that's how science works. Like
mm,
you have to do the actual work. You have to go through the methodology. You can say anything you want, but
mhm.
it doesn't matter unless you have something uh, to test and
Yeah.
something to show for it to substantiate your claim. Today I was just reading NASA's like, oh, it looks like we have a way of possibly discovering bacteria or DNA in ice on the frozen caps of Mars, and here's why. And they go on to explain it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I already thought about that. Like, not that I'm smart. It's just like it's easy for us who are not scientists to just go like, that's
Mm,
probably possible. That's probably like why wouldn't that be possible?
mhm.
The scientists, like, it's not it's not enough to just have the idea. and make up the possibility. And yet, without the idea, without someone thought to think that, someone thought to start that test to say, wait, can we find a way to to detect bacteria in the ice and caps on Mars?
Yeah.
So I think throughout history we have example after example of speculation turning out to be truth. And it's funny, like we're talking about Reddit earlier. Like I've gone on Reddit about the split screen experiment, the two gosh, what
The double slit
double slit.
experiment?
Thank you. Yeah, double slit experiment.
Yeah.
And people are trying to explain it away, and one of the excuses was the observation doesn't affect the subatomic particles. It's the fact that they have an instrument, and the instrument that's measuring it is interacting with it. And I'm like, yeah, but the instrument's not a baseball bat hitting a ball.
Mhm.
It's just the instrument doing the observation on behalf of the human. Like it's not actually interacting. Like, and they bend over backwards to try to explain the most bizarre discovery in physics.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got on that one.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Like
Yeah.
I am all for scientific rigor. In fact, one of the scientists that I'm obsessed with and have kind of pulled into Bernardo Kastrup's world is Michael Levin, the developmental biologist Michael Levin, who is simultaneously running like actual experiments that are resulting in these groundbreaking results that are changing everything we thought we knew about evolution, about biology, about like everything. And he's doing it in the lab. He's doing it experimentally, and he's doing that experimentally inspired by philosophical questions and imagination and good sci-fi. And then he's bringing it into the lab, and these groundbreaking discoveries are happening because he's willing to think outside the box. When his colleagues are like, oh, don't go over there, don't look that way, we've already figured that out over there. And so thank goodness for the rigor of science, right? Thank goodness for the replicability of really great experimentation and studies. But what we also know is that there's a whole litany of phenomena that don't fit into the replicability, just don't conform to the scientific method, essentially. In fact, observational astronomy is one of those fields of science where it's observational. We can't replicate a supernova. We can't replicate, there are many fields of science. However, the measurement becomes, so accurate that we can then reliably do other things based on what we find. But what's fascinating is that we need the rigor, and we need to also be open to the reality that there are phenomena happening that cannot be measured or cannot be replicated, and that does not mean that they're not happening just because they can't be measured. So the telepathy tapes, thank goodness Kai and crew have the rigor to do this documentary and set things up in Faraday cages and really run the experiments and do this, because they know the pressure they're under. They know, if anybody, right? But I brought up Ingo Swann because I named my cat after him, but also Ingo Swann is, he's not only prolific and genius and was a very important figure, but he has protocol for learning psi abilities, practicing them, and then finding out for yourself. And, that kind of first person experiential, to really follow through on that experiential level and bring it from conceptual to phenomenological.
Remote viewing, I do speak to people who start to practice and seem to, according to them, make improvements and actually, for them, self-corroborate the accuracy of what they can do. And I think that's very cool. I would like to see more studies of this, but that's where I was talking to, like, again, to Raiden, and he's talking about the
Mm.
subtleties, like the idea that you're gonna, move a chair across the room like you're Luke Skywalker. Like, that's not that's not how it. Like, he's saying that the effects of consciousness on reality, it's
Right.
there, but it's subtle. It's very, very subtle. So, which then again, back to you, like, it's like some things you can only observe. Some things are so subtle, like how do you even measure it?
Mhm.
Um, what's your accuracy rate? Uh, if you're studying, if you're in, I don't know, a ghost hunter, right? And you're studying, spirit world, and you're trying to detect spirits, you don't have any control over that entity's consciousness. Let's assume
Mhm.
it's real. So it can decide when it wants to come and show itself and when not to, right? So how do you study
Yeah.
something like that? Um, Same thing with UFOs, and this is what I've always felt about UFOs,
Mhm.
is that despite the fact that we have now billions of phones with cameras, like, how come we're not seeing, like, this amazing video on UFOs? Everyone, okay,
Yeah.
so that's, I've heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say that like a million times. Um, well, considering they've been observing, if we, assume that they're real, they would have been observing us for a very long time. They probably noticed we have cameras in our hands. Like, just throwing that out there. And if
Yeah.
if they just wanted to keep a little bit of a distance, like, why couldn't they? You know?
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that that's the difference between, like you were saying, um, science is good, but there's a difference between good science and orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is a mindset, and people really get stuck there. And you're trying to, I guess, in your podcast, help people
Yeah.
get out of that.
Yeah, yeah. I want I want to cultivate conversations and experiences that allow for an expansion
Hmm.
of what the left hemisphere thinks is possible and
Okay.
what we're allowed to think about in mainstream society or consensus society, consensus reality. I
Hmm.
cultivating the space, cultivating dialogue, cultivating a willingness to explore the mystery
Hmm.
is really like it's the space that wants to, I guess, happen through me. Or and so do I want to help people get out of that? Or like, I guess that would be an intention, but it's more so this sense of like, if one can create the space for that kind of exploration. And there are so many people doing that, thank goodness,
Hmm.
increasingly so, communities and experiencer groups and
Sure. Yeah.
Exo Academia. And I don't know if you know Darren, but he has these amazing programs that are just inclusive of these kinds of explorations. And so yeah, ontological grok is really exploring this possibility that actually it's our nature to thrive, in the sense of it's our nature to be adaptive, available, and open
Hmm.
to exploring the amorphous, or to exploring the enigma, or to exploring and not needing necessarily to definitively put a box around something and say, oh, figured it out,
Hmm.
but to really navigate the possibility space of life and experience, um, and see what arises in in the imaginal, right, or in the possibility space of that, but in a really grounded and practical way. Like, we don't want to. I don't want to float off into nowhere land, but
Right. Well,
and I think they're not mutually exclusive, and I
yeah.
think that's really what my the, I guess, desire is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great, and that's responsible. When I first started podcasting, I was very much in the infotainment sector, I guess you
Ah,
could say. Well, me
interesting.
just meaning that I was way more open and willing to have guests and conversations that uh, I am not now.
Mm.
that are that were so, borderline or were incredulous. And I think, and again, like that's
Mm.
kind of, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the conversation, but there was someone actually not about a year or so ago. I'm not gonna say who, but I had someone on the podcast, and I just felt I can't do this again. Like I can't have someone who I feel like is twisting a yarn, or is just making things up, just
Yeah. Yeah.
just to sound interesting.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done with that, like, and for a while though, I kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed, like you said, Coast to Coast AM. I enjoyed like some of the fantastical stories. Like, I don't care if they're real or not. Like I'm enjoying,
Mhm.
this person's story. But then for myself, I couldn't engage with those people in the same way that I used to. I've changed in that regard. So I've kind of, you're doing the smart thing. Like you're saying, you're setting up some parameters for yourself, at
Mm.
the start. And I think that's a great thing for you to be doing.
Mm. Mm. How do you do? I know. How are we on time?
We're definitely over. So it's up to you. If you want to keep going, we can go a little bit
I'm
longer. Yeah.
good. I'm good. Yeah. I would be really curious to know how you navigate that, like kind of sensing if somebody is coming from a genuine, this is what I experienced, or if someone might have more of a fanfare or
Mhm.
intention around attention.
It's all the easiest way to recognize it for me is in the phrasing. If the phrasing sounds more how I imagine a sales pitch would be, if meaning it doesn't have a totally natural cadence,
Mm.
like there's an affectuation there. And I don't know how to describe
Mm.
what that is, but it could be like super subtle, but it's there. And if I
Mm.
get if I get the inclination that they're trying to convince me, that's also a flag too, red
Mm.
flag. Um, Sometimes someone's passionate about something and they want to impart this knowledge to you. That's different. That's different
Mhm.
than I feel like someone like really is trying to get me on their side,
Yeah.
because that serves them in some way. So I
Mhm.
look for those kind of signals. Um,
Mm.
and again, like there's a big difference between that. Like we all have ambitions, we all have goals, we all want to share information and our ideas and that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, yeah. Um, and I won't say, and it wouldn't be like some people plug their books like a million times in a conversation, and that's okay. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that they're disingenuous, you know?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Um,
Cool. Thank you for that.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. As they say, there's always a book, right? Which I don't think there's
Right, right.
anything, well, it depends on the agreement of the container, right? Or the agreement of
Yeah.
whatever's going on. And yeah, it's unfortunate that we didn't even get to talk about stigma necessarily in all of this, but there's stigma just so rampant in all of this, and even the stigma of being a grifter, right? Or
Mhm.
the stigma of being a charlatan, or the stigma of being a liar. And um, I think has, in a way, like it's an important call. I don't know, like it's an important maybe intention of beckoning forward truth in people or honesty in people, but it's
Mhm.
become perhaps so policey or doxy, and it just, I think it dissuades a lot of people from wanting to come out who have had experiences, or
Yeah.
it's just so entrenched in shame and judgment, and um, yeah,
Well, and
yeah,
like you said, there's support for that, and you're hoping to
yeah,
do some of that. And I
yeah,
volunteer for MUFON, the Experience and Resource Team, and we're there.
awesome,
We're there for that as well. So
awesome,
there are many more resources, and you know,
yeah.
but there seems to be a lot of people are having these experiences. So the more options people have, because it doesn't have to be just one place.
Mhm.
It's like somebody can go to a group therapy, but also have a private therapist, right? Or
Yeah.
can go into an addiction support group, but also talk to their priest or whatever. Like it's okay to have different
Mhm.
ways of dealing with that
Yeah.
experience and
Yeah.
having multiple outlets. I love that. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, I would love to keep talking, but we can't. So
Yeah.
we got to call it at some point. If you could leave us with one thought, whatever you want, what would it be?
Follow the light. How about you?
I'm wondering what the light is. Right.
It's a great curiosity.
Mm-hmm. So is it one and the same? Is the light the curiosity? Are you have you explored Terence McKenna a little bit?
Yeah.
What do you think about his prediction about 2012 and not coming true? And I know he passed away before he, I'm sure he probably would have shifted his thinking on this. Are we headed towards something? Is there a light at the end that we're headed towards?
I really appreciated what you shared about telos and love, and that there might be a teleological inclination that is drawing or orienting into the future. And the honest answer is I have no fucking idea what's going on. I don't know.
What? Come on, Fawn. Jeez.
I know. In the infinite possibility space. The light seems to be more life-giving and helpful and evolutionary than orienting toward the dark. And so I think naturally that seems more viable.
All right. Thanks, Fawn. I really appreciate your insights, your perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah, and being so open. It's fantastic.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And for those who are listening, go to Fawn's website, which is Fawn Miller. Is it fawnmiller.com?
Yep, fawnmiller.com. Or for my more UAP-oriented happenings, you can go to fawnmiller.com/fawn-universal.
Okay. And when's your podcast gonna launch?
Let's say December, January. All goes well.
Okay. Fingers crossed. Like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan. Thank you to Alan's audience. And look forward to following along more.
Okay. Thanks, Fawn. And thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. As always, this podcast will be rebroadcast on the UNX network Thursday nights, 11 p.m. Pacific time, 2 a.m. Eastern, Fridays. And if you want to follow this podcast on social media, the best place to go is at Coffee and UFOs Podcast on Instagram. Until next time, peace and love, everyone, and live in the mystery.
It's good to be an earthling. I wish more of us would think of ourselves that way.
I don't have a problem with skeptics. It's debunkers that are on some other level that I don't understand.
Essentially an inference of a change in local gravity.
Saucer-shaped craft, and they're hovering over the water.
Blue Book Special Report 14. The better the quality of the sighting, the more likely to be unexplainable.